Good evening. Welcome to a regularly scheduled meeting of the Waterville City Council. Thank you for coming to this new space, and thank you, Colby College, for allowing us to use this space for this time. We don't have agendas on a plastic sleeve in the back. Instead, we have one up here. If you can't read it or can't see it, I'm sorry. And these are just little bugs we'll be working out as we go along, I'm sure. And any concerns or comments that you have about having the meetings here when it comes to stuff like this, just please let us know, let Patty or Mike know, and I'm sure we'll work hard to address it to make sure that it's out for everybody. Before we get started, I do want to ask Stoll to please stand and lead us in the pledge. Over here now. United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And it's actually not on the agenda, but I do have a proclamation to read, and I'm going to come around to the front. And Scott McAdoo, could you please come up here and stand with me? I asked Scott to come up because we actually have this proclamation because of Scott. I'm very happy that he brought this to our attention. I think it's a very special thing for us to do, and so thank you. Whereas bullying is physical, verbal, sexual, or emotional harm or intimidation directed at an individual or group of people. Whereas bullying occurs in neighborhoods, playgrounds, schools, and through technology such as the internet and cell phones. Whereas targets of bullying are more likely to develop learning problems than those who are not bullied. And students who are repeatedly bullied often fear activities such as riding the bus, going to school, and attending community activities. Whereas bullying can lead to lasting physical and emotional scars for life such as depression, anxiety, and in some cases suicide. Whereas children who bully are at a greater risk of engaging in more serious violent behaviors, whereas bullying is less talked about than many other subjects, and many people hide the bullying for fear of further bullying, or they feel not much is being done to stop and prevent it. Now, therefore, I, Nick Isgrow, Mayor of Waterville, on behalf of the City Council, recognize the month of October as National Bullying Prevention Month, declaring that bullying of any form will not be welcome in Waterville, and the city will offer support for all those who have been affected by encouraging bullying education and prevention. Thank you. Next up is Community Notes. Community Notes is a time where if anybody has something they would like to say or speak about, let us know about, that is not currently scheduled on tonight's agenda. Now would be the time to do it. And we would just ask that you please come up to the podium and tell us your name and where you live and what it is you have to say. Is there anybody for Community Notes?
Hello, I'm Cindy Jacobs, and I'm representing the Waterville Public Library. And I just wanted to share with all of you, we're having our annual fundraiser, Nosh and Knockoff, on October 27th. Tickets are available on our website and on our Facebook page, and it's going to be a wonderful mystery play, all taking place at the library, and I really hope you'll all join us. Thanks so much.
Anybody else for Community Notes?
Hi, I'm Dan Libby, Ward 4. This is what selling out looks like. It's great. So I just want to talk about several things that took place in the last meeting and other meetings that still concern me. And at the last meeting, it was really rather interesting. At the end of the meeting, when the council ignored the town again, and it's over 1,000 signatures to move an item forward to the college, to Colby and to Thomas. At the end of the meeting, I was kind of smirking and laughing because, I thought, what a joke this council really is. And there was a gentleman in the back. He said, well, what do you expect when you act like an orifice to the council? And he didn't call me an orifice. He didn't call me an anus either, but he did call me something that started with an A. And I can handle that. But what I found interesting was that this guy, Eric Thomas, is running for the council. And I have some concerns about that, because if this is somebody that's running for the council, it tells you a lot about who he is and what he would do if he were your representative. What it really means is that he expects you, when you come up here, to cater to him. If you don't say or speak to him the way that he wants you to talk to him, he's going to think this about you, and it kind of tells you how he's going to vote. We've seen how this town votes against us. It doesn't listen to us. It hasn't for quite some time. It's really concerning, and I don't know him personally, and he didn't know me, but that was his reaction to me. He didn't respond to me, he reacted. I would encourage you not to vote for somebody like that. We don't need more of what we have here. The next piece I would like to talk about is the plastic bag ordinance, which is really rather interesting because this town had were there votes for the plastic bag ordinance that were presented to this council? No, so we had no votes for that to put to the town, but we have over 1,000 petition signatures to have something presented to the college, but we ignored those. Very consistent behavior for this council. I would remind you of that they don't listen to us. Please don't vote for anybody that they endorse. It's sickening. But what I would tell you is I have spent the summer trying to find the plastic bag problem. Those of you who are in this room may have seen me running around this town, all over this town, wherever I could, looking for plastic bags. I've lost 55 pounds looking for these bags. I've lost more pounds than I found bags. We don't have a plastic bag problem. What we have is a receptacle problem in this town. One thing I haven't found in this town are places we can throw garbage away. We don't take care of our own problem, but we really don't have a trash problem. I think we do take care of this community. We've spent a lot of time trying to make it nice, a good place to live. And I would remind everybody now that please vote no on this ordinance because we have the choice today that this council is proposing we vote on. And that is when we go to the store today, we can either elect to take a bag or buy a bag or not bring one at all. And I would also remind you now is that if this ordinance comes here, look at how busy the supermarkets can get today even with the express checkouts where you can go through and do your own groceries. Those will go away when this ordinance comes. It won't exist anymore. So that's just another inconvenience for something that we already have a choice for. I would encourage you to vote no. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Anybody else for community notes? You may.
I would just let everyone know that we're taking absentee ballot requests now at City Hall. The ballots will be coming in hopefully by the end of this week. We expect to start in-person absentee voting on Tuesday, October 9th. Thank you.
Green Finch, Ward 6. Mr. Mayor, the citizens you recently blamed for the repercussions of your tweet attacking a child who survived a school shooting are not the mob. The 3 who started the recall process were and still are engaged and vocal residents of the city, not the mob. The over 1,000 people who signed the petition to force the recall on the ballot were residents of this city, not the mob. The nearly 50% of voters who agreed that your actions had no place in a civil society were residents of this city, not the mob. Marking those who disagree with you in your vile actions, the mob, dehumanizes them and illustrates your continued lack of leadership. All of those individuals are your constituents and citizens of our city. When Karen Heck endured threats to ride outside her house and drive her from the city, you said nothing. When you posted on Facebook about losing your job and someone asked for a list of all city councilors and where they worked, you said nothing. When supporters of yours made it known that they would be answering their doors armed on anyone with a petition, you said nothing. When death threats publicly appeared on the Waterville Republican page you are connected to, you said nothing. When Julian Payne, an elected official supporting you, called for angry mobs to show at council and also suggested tarring and feathering anyone who opposed you, you said nothing. When I stood in front of you a few months ago and expressed dismay that others were being threatened for participating in their democracy, you finally spoke, only to say, the recall is over, let's move on. How convenient for you that you choose now to speak up, though for what gain, I don't know. I do know it's not for the benefit of my city. Yes, my city. I wasn't born here, but 6 years ago, out of anywhere else in the country, I chose Waterville to call my home. My thoughts and opinions on what I want to see for the city are just as valid as those who have lived nowhere else. I stand by what I said earlier this summer. This othering and attacking has to stop. It's time for leadership in our city, to borrow a hashtag of yours. We have a contentious budget seasoning approaching with tough questions and decisions that have to be made. In order to get through it, the people of this city need to believe that opposing views won't be dehumanized. There is no the mob, no mass of people who are out to get you, And I cannot believe I have to tell you this, but people who disagree with you are not part of a sophisticated underground regime. They are, like me, passionate about their beliefs and unwilling to be silent. You can try to create mystery and threats around us to benefit your political agenda, but personally, I'd prefer if you started leading our city with civility and true leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. And anyone who doesn't know what he's talking about, what we are talking about here is an article that I wrote this week. It was published in the Main Wire. I would encourage you to go there at the www.themainwire.com, where you can find a link on my public Facebook page. I have no problem with anybody reading that. And it was actually in defense of, I did bring up my personal story, but it was also in defense of the really disgusting things that are going on in this country, like the fact that Senator Susan Collins' staff have been threatened with acts of sexual violence, other violence, boxes of coat hangers sent to her office, really disgusting things. And what I stated in the article was that regardless of a person's political affiliation, when people are subject to this kind of disgusting harassment, it actually is wrong, and whether they are a Democrat or a Republican, a friend or a foe, someone you agree with or not, it is up to all of us to actually come together and say that these kinds of things are not acceptable. And I think that's a message that only a certain type of person would be offended by, but I would encourage you to go read the article for yourself. You may choose to like it or not, that's fine, but I would encourage you to find out what I actually said. So thank you.
I'm Nancy Sanford, and I live in Ward 1, and several things. First of all, the fact that the gentleman that spoke first about there not being a plastic bag problem in Waterville because he can't find plastic bags on the ground, that's not the only point. If anybody wants to look at both sides of the issue, you can go on many different websites and see what plastic is doing in our country, in our oceans, for instance. Secondly, I am so sick and tired of city council members being attacked because somebody happens to disagree with a vote that they made or didn't make. Being on the city council, it can't be a very good experience at this point, I wouldn't think. And such behavior does, I believe, discourage those of us that might think about it. I will only talk for myself. Nick and I don't agree on many things. However, we sat one night during a city council meeting. I got up and asked him if he would meet me at CLAT so we could get to know each other better as human beings. We did that, and we spoke for an hour and a half, okay? We did not agree on everything, but guess what? We were able to have a mature conversation and perhaps learn from one another as to how somebody who doesn't happen to agree with you arrives at what they believe. Now, Nick, you just approved a proclamation about National Bullying Prevention Month. As somebody who was severely bullied as a kid, I know what scars I have had throughout the rest of my life. Fortunately, the healing has happened, mostly. But what has been going on at city council meetings, particularly when talking about whether it be the recall or whether some other issue, is bullying. And if we don't admit it, then we're just pulling the wool over our eyes. And as a person who was in print, grouped as a wealthy elitist who relied on dark money to bring in people from outside of Waterville to dethrone or to get signatures on the recall petition. Without those people ever talking to me, that's bullying. And the passion with which people express their opinions is okay, but it is not okay to stand at this podium and call somebody all sorts of names because they happen to disagree with what you think. And so it is my hope that we as citizens of Waterville will not stand for it anymore. And that when we see bullying, be it here at a city council meeting or out on the street, that we will say something. I wasn't going to get up in community notes because I don't particularly like getting up in front of people and speaking. But that's it.
Thank you.
Julian Payne, Ward 5. So you're Italian?
Yes, sir.
You're a mob.
I guess I get to use the term. It's not cultural appropriation.
I find one of the speaker's comments misleading. The tarred and feathered quote, I didn't say I would ever tar and feather anyone. It was if you do or behave in a certain way, you get tarred and feathered, meaning you get judged. And people can get up here and speak about how tough things are. I remember how you were insulted throughout the recall. People came up here and insulted you. The council told the community that they knew nothing of anyone coming from the outside. This is the same speaker that allowed the Democrat Party to be tabled, that later told me was not within the rules of the Democrat committee, that drove Karen Rancourt out. So if I said tarred and feathered, it's about the way people are treated. Then a piece of paper was given to the city manager by the same person connecting this was found on Julian Payne's page and Resistance and the Republican GOP. So I can take your DuPont's page and say, I found this on your page and something else and something else. So it's completely misleading. I do police my Facebook page. If I see comments that are inappropriate, I take them down. There's a lot of things I don't share that are current hot topics as a school board member, and I'm careful about that. There's many present things in the news with Kavanaugh that I'm not going to put on my page because I'm sensitive to that. But people can talk of feelings. I've had people trying to be held back from hitting me at council meetings. I've been called the A word by people. My family's been gone after. I've been gone after. And everyone in this room, you know who you are. You know who've done that, and you know your part in this, and you know who you've communicated with, and you know how you have bullied me. And if you think that it hasn't affected me or bothered me, it has as well. And that's why these things get going. You can all sit here and play innocent. I've seen emails from councillors to the city manager and back. I've seen it all. You all know how you've attacked me. You all know what you've witnessed people have said about me, and you all know what part you've played in that environment, and it is hurtful. Thank you.
I think the lesson of the night is thank you, Scott McAdoo, for the suggestion of the proclamation. Andre.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mark Andre. I'm a candidate for House District 110. You know, it's funny as I sit in the room listening to the conversations we've been having, it's a rehashing of some pretty unconstructive arguments. And next to Bruce White, I've probably spoken to more residents in the last month and a half than anyone. I think Bruce has me beat. He's been pretty busy. But I can tell you from the conversations I've had, residents are not concerned with the mayoral recall or any of these other things going on. They're concerned with the very real tax problem in Waterville, and they want constructive solutions to it. Now, 2 weeks ago, I presented a petition to the council. I understand why you said no to it. I really do. I think it was viewed as part of this ongoing argument between us, them, partisan issue. I was hoping it would not become that, to be honest. I was hoping it would open up a very real discussion about how we can fix the problem of our taxes here in Waterville, because it's become clear over the last 6 to 8 years that there is no interest in Augusta from the other 149 legislators in the state of fixing our unique tax problem here in Waterville. And that probably isn't going to change anytime soon. I can stand here and tell you I support revenue sharing. It won't change the views in Augusta. So what I can tell you is we need to start looking at different methods to fix our tax problem. The city manager several weeks ago acknowledged that taxes will go up next year. Regardless of what decisions you make, you may limit how much they go up, but there is no real fix to this. We have a revenue problem in the city, and the revenues simply aren't growing fast enough to overcome the increases or even a flat line in the budget. We're losing revenues, in fact, last year. I believe that's why the taxes went up this year. So what I will tell you is I understand that it's political season. I understand why it was not an opportune time to bring my petition to the council. But I've had a lot of residents, well, the 1,100 plus now that have signed the petition, ask me what next. And my only answer to that is we're continuing to collect signatures on our petition. And when the new council is seated after the November elections, we'll present it to them beyond the political season when, well, hopefully the political wranglings are behind us. And I hope we can have another hearing on the issue at that point. But I want to thank the council for their time last week in reviewing the petition, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Community notes. All right, we're going to move on to the disclosure of conflict of interest. Is there anybody on the council that feels they have a conflict of interest with any of the votes they'll take tonight? No, wonderful. Now we'll move on to the approval of the consent agenda. Could I get a motion for the approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Discussion. All in favor? Moving on to unfinished business, we have Order 159, 2018.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Is there any discussion on this? Okay, Patty, could I get a roll call, please?
Counselor Sol,
Yes.
Counselor White,
Yes.
Counselor Mayu,
Yes.
Counselor O'Donnell, Counselor Tate, Counselor DuPont.
Yes.
It is 6 in favor and 0 opposed.
Next, we are moving on to new business resolution 165, 2018.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for declaration of dangerous building and a nuisance, 19 Western Avenue, Waterville, Maine.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Mike, do you want to speak to this, or Bill? Great, thank you.
The matter, Bill Lee, City Solicitor, the matter before you this evening is for you to make a determination of whether the real estate located at 19 Western Avenue, owned by one Leonard Poulin Jr., is a dangerous building within the meaning of Title 17 MRSA, Section 2851, subsection 2. And if you do decide that it is dangerous, then what is to be done about it? Specifically, it would either be to be repaired or to be torn down. Now, you do have before you proposed findings of fact, conclusions of law. You're not bound by them. We just wanted you to have something before you for your consideration. So you make your own decision after you hear the evidence that is presented. There are going to be a series of exhibits introduced to the city clerk showing service upon Mr. Poulin and various legal entities that have liens on the property itself. And after they are introduced, there's going to be testimony from the Code Enforcement Office, as well as some photographs that everyone here will be able to see, showing the condition of the building, what efforts have been made to remediate it over the years. And I, at this point, actually have a question. Is Mr. Poulin here, Leonard Poulin Jr.? Okay. After the Code Enforcement Office testifies, counselors, of course, have the right to ask questions of code enforcement regarding anything concerning the testimony. Mr. Poulin has a right as well to ask questions of Code Enforcement Office regarding the evidence that's been presented. And then Mr. Poulin is to be given an opportunity to present whatever it is he wishes to. This is a hearing where we are determining someone's property rights. So there's a due process right here to be fully heard. Counselors have the opportunity to ask Mr. Poulin questions, and it may be that we will have some questions of Mr. Poulin as well. What I would propose to be done after that is for any members of the public who may wish to address this matter to be able to step forward. I believe there may be some neighbors here, for example, and they may have something to say about the condition of the property as well. And counselors, of course, could ask them questions. And after these matters are presented, there may be a brief summing up on the part of the city, and Mr. Poulin, of course, would have the same opportunity. Concluding that, you counselors decide what is to be done. And again, number one, is this building dangerous within the meaning of the statute? And you're going to have testimony on that. And number two, if it is, what is to be done about it? If you've seen in your paperwork, there's all sorts of background work that was done to present one of these matters, and that was done by Mariah Gleaton, who's an attorney in our office. And I thought rather than having her just be in the background the entire time, I'm going to turn this over to her to present the matter. Are there any questions any counselors might have regarding the procedure before we begin? Okay. Ms. Gleaton?
Thank you, Bill. The first thing I'd like to do is just take care of a procedural matter, which is that notice of this hearing was properly served upon the various parties in interest, which include Mr. Poulin and anyone who has any interest in the property vis-a-vis a lien. And there were 3 entities that had liens against the property. So at this time, I'd like to move to enter in Exhibits 1 through 4. And I'll do that by providing it to Patty. So the first exhibit is documentation that notice was properly served on Mr. Poulin when he was present. The second exhibit is notice that was properly served on the Internal Revenue Service. Is anyone from the Internal Revenue Service here? And I don't see anyone present for the Internal Revenue Service. Exhibit 3 is notice served upon the Maine Department of Labor. Is anyone from the Maine Department of Labor here? No one's present for the Maine Department of Labor. Exhibit 4 is notice served on the Town of Winslow. Is anyone here on behalf of the Town of Winslow? So now that that is resolved, and I actually do have a copy from Mr. Poulin as well for the service. Thank you, Bill. And I think at this point we can jump right into testimony in regards to the condition of the building. And what I'd like to do is call Mr. Collins to this. to the podium, and we can kind of go through his observations and what has happened over time. Garth, would you please introduce yourself and in what capacity you work for the City of Waterville?
My name is Garth Collins. I am the Ordinance Compliance Officer for the Code Enforcement Office for the City of Waterville.
And what do you do as the Ordinance Compliance Officer?
My job is to make sure that the ordinances the city writes are being enforced properly.
And how long have you been the Ordinance Compliance Officer for the City?
Been 12 months as the Ordinance Compliance Officer.
And what did you do before you became the Ordinance Compliance Officer?
I was the Director of Code Enforcement for the City of Waterville.
And what do you do as the Director of Code Enforcement?
As the Director, we enforce all the city ordinances as well as issue permits for building, electrical, plumbing, businesses, etc.
And how long did you serve the city in that capacity?
17 years.
17 years. And in those 17 years, did you have occasion to have knowledge of the property located at 19 Western Avenue, Waterville, Maine?
Yes, I did.
And what led you to have knowledge of that?
The building caught on fire around 6 years ago, and we knew that the building had extreme damage to it. We told the current owner at the time that he had to tear it down and repair it. He advised us that he sold the building to Mr. Poulin. Contacted Mr. Poulin within probably a year after that and asked him what his intent was. And his intent was to fix the building up, get it back up into shape so that he could run it. We worked with it as long as we could on it. Each year it was, it just never happened.
I just want to break down a little bit of information.
Sure.
As far as the condition of the property 6 years ago after the fire, was there anything, could you describe maybe the interior and the exterior as far as damage to the building?
Most of the damage was interior damage. The third floor, the roof was open, burned through. That apartment building was gutted right out. And then it filtered down into the other buildings with smoke damage, water damage, and so forth. So.
Were there scorch marks from the fire in the interior of the building?
Yes.
Were any of the windows at the time 6 years ago broken or damaged?
Yeah, several of the windows were broken out of the building at the time of the fire.
And you mentioned that you had communications with Mr. Poulin. Were those ongoing over the last few years of his ownership?
Yes, it is. I've contacted Lenny probably once every summer. We discuss the building, we discuss the maintenance, get the lawns mowed, get any trash cleaned up, and fix the outside, get the windows closed up, and so forth. And it was always, yes, I'm going to take care of it, I'll get on it, and obviously it never came about.
Never came about. Have you recently been to the property?
I was at the property in April.
And was there still that hole in the roof and still the broken windows?
Yeah, the building was probably more deteriorated than it was from the fire because of all the water damage from the hole, the windows being open and so forth. Just more deterioration and damage to the property.
Was the interior rotting because of the exposure to the elements?
Yes.
In this past year, have you had any communications directly with Leonard in regards to this property?
Yeah, I contacted Lenny in April. A lot of the neighbors kept complaining. We're trying to work with everybody, and there's a great deal of workload that we do deal with. But I contacted Len and asked him to meet with me at the property. I was there. He didn't show up, and he called me shortly after and said, "You want to go back over?" At the time, I was busy with something else, and we discussed the issue over the phone, which was, "Len, you've got to get this property cleaned up. You've got to get the outside fixed up so it's presentable. I don't care what you do with the inside, but as long as the outside is done."
And did you do anything to follow up vis-a-vis a written communication to Leonard after this conversation?
Yeah, the conversation wrote a letter and sent to Len telling him the 1st of May to start on the building and work on it until it was finished.
And if I could address all the council's attention to, I believe you have all been provided a packet of pictures. On the last page, you can see a letter sent by Mr. Collins to Leonard Poulin dated April 19, 2018. Is that a copy? I'm also showing that to Mr. Collins at this point in time. Mr. Collins, is that the letter that you sent to Leonard Poulin?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and that was to notify him of the violation and to ask for further improvements on the property?
That's correct.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to enter in that as an exhibit as well, that letter. After sending this letter, did you hear from Mr. Poulin at all?
No, I haven't spoken to Len since.
And did you go to the property? You mentioned you went to the property in August. Were any of the repairs that you discussed over the phone or the requests that you made in the letter addressed by Mr. Poulin?
No, none of the repairs were made.
I have no further questions for Mr. Collins if the councilors would like to inquire.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I thought you said that you visited the property in April. Then I heard August. When was the last time you visited the property?
When was the last time you visited the property?
It was in August.
It was in August, okay. Is that when the photos were taken?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Gar, on a scale from 1 to 10, you know there's a lot of different blights in the city of Waterville. You've been accustomed, you've seen up and down, all around. What is, on a scale from 1 to 10, where would you rate this?
An 8.
So it's right up there in the top echelon.
Yeah.
Guys, ever have any people get hurt or injured at the property?
Not to my knowledge.
Any indication that vandals have been inhabiting the property or using it for gathering?
You'd have to contact the police on that. The neighbors have told us that people have gone in and stole all the copper out of it and so forth, but we don't get that information to us. That would be a police issue.
Any explanation from Mr. Poulin as to why he promises he's going to, but he never has?
Sorry.
Do you know why he has promised to make repairs and has not?
I really can't assume why he doesn't do it.
He hasn't explained to you why? He hasn't given you a rationale?
He's always told me that he's going to do it. He's in good faith. I'm doing this, I'm doing this. He showed up a couple of years with, I think last year there was a truck there and a camper, and he had a guy that was supposed to be doing repairs. But obviously, as we go into the building in August, you can see that nothing was ever done. There's no repairs that was ever made to the building. So I can't really speak for Mr. Poulin and the crew and what they did or didn't do. But being a contractor and being a person that's in the line of work, I feel that he's had plenty of opportunity to get this building taken care of.
So could I just need to interrupt. I've been asked if councilors could speak directly into the microphone. I don't think you need to get your face right on it, but just, it's not coming through, and this is folks at home. I'm deaf.
Ever have any assessment by any appraiser as to what there might be for value in the building right now?
Not just what the assessor's office has a value at.
What do they say?
I don't have that information in front of me.
Any other questions from the council?
Mr. Poulin, you have an opportunity also to inquire if you would like. Yes, and remember that you're just asking questions of Mr. Collins, and you'll have an opportunity to testify yourself later. Okay. All right. Thank you, Garth.
Okay.
Next, I'll be calling Mr. Dan Bradstreet. Dan, would you please introduce yourself and tell the City Council and the public what you, in what capacity you work for the City of Waterville?
Dan Bradstreet, I'm the City Code Enforcement Officer.
And what are your duties as the City Code Enforcement Officer?
I conduct inspections, deal with the zoning in the city, issue permits, things of that nature.
And prior to your work as, is your official title the Director of Code Enforcement?
Yes.
And prior to that, what did you do for work?
I spent 4 years at the Sheridan Corporation, doing commercial construction, industrial construction, estimating, contract negotiations, things like that. 15 years doing residential construction before that.
And as Director of Code Enforcement, do you have an employee?
I'm sorry?
Do you have an employee?
No.
As Director of Code Enforcement is Garth Collins.
Oh, yeah.
Well, or does he work for you, I guess?
I suppose. We're partners.
Partners. And did he draw your attention to the property at 19 Western Avenue?
Yes.
And when did he do that?
I believe it was March or April.
And what was the conversation that you had with Garth in regards to this property?
He just gave me a little bit of history about the property, his dealings with Mr. Poulin, went over the condition of the property a little bit, and basically had mentioned that there were some neighbors that had called, and that he was going to attempt to deal with Mr. Poulin again to try to get the property taken care of.
And after Garth communicated that with you, what did you do when, what did you do essentially?
Garth had sent a letter to Mr. Poulin, the letter that you mentioned that was dated in April.
Okay.
Yeah.
And to the best of your knowledge, did Mr. Poulin reach out to either you or Garth in regards to the property?
I don't believe so, no.
And what did you do after he didn't respond?
Garth tried to call him and made a meeting with him to meet at the property, as he said.
Did that happen before, perhaps, the letter was sent out?
It could have.
Okay. And after the letter was sent, and no response was received, what did you do then?
We went over to take a look at the property.
Was this in August?
Yes,
okay.
we did.
And when you say we, who was that?
Garth and myself.
Okay.
Yeah, after some time had gone by, nothing had been done. Neighbors were still complaining. We went to the property, took some photos, did a quick sort of evaluation of it, and spoke with Mike Roy about where we should go from here. And he mentioned we should contact Mr. Lee,
okay.
Which we did.
Why don't we go through the pictures that you saw? And you said you took these in August?
I did.
Okay. So if you don't mind, we'll pull up the first one first. And what I've done is I've marked, there are 8 pictures that we'll go over today, and I've marked them on the packet that I have, 7 through 14. So we'll start with Exhibit 7, and I'll move to enter those as Exhibits 2 for the record. What is this a picture of?
This is a street view picture from Western Avenue of the home.
And what's notable about the condition of the property?
Well, you can see there's some windows missing there, there's some scorching and fire damage. That section on the right, there's a tree growing up through, there's a roof missing there.
Did you say that there was a tree growing up through the building?
Yes, onto it and through that section.
And that's on the right side of the building?
Right there, yeah.
To the right of the restaurant?
Correct. More like a bush than a tree, I suppose.
Gotcha.
Weeds.
And we'll move on to what I've marked as Exhibit 8. And what is this in view of?
Just another angle of the exterior of the building, showing again more windows that are missing, some fire damage as well, scorching, yeah.
And did you have an opportunity to walk through the building?
I did.
And how would you describe, how did all these open windows and broken windows impact the interior of the building?
Well, it seemed very soggy, did not seem safe to be inside the building. Just the accumulation of being exposed to the elements over a 6-year period of time. I can only imagine how much snow has been in there and thawed out, as well as fire damage, water damage from the fire event that occurred 6 years ago, and the multiple openings in the roof that are throughout the building.
So the next picture, if you could move on, this would be what I marked as Exhibit 9. That looks like a close-up picture of the tree that you mentioned earlier, or
Correct.
the bush that you mentioned earlier that's growing on the ceiling.
Correct.
And if we go to Exhibit 10, the next picture, that looks like a close-up of the scorch damage that's still in the building, or you can see coming out of the building, and a window that's exposed.
And a section of roof that's missing inside the building as well.
Oh, that's true. So if you look through that window and you see blue behind it, that's the roof
Sky.
that was, yeah, that's in the roof.
Yep.
Okay. So let's go to the interior of the building. If you flip to the next exhibit, Exhibit 11. What's this a picture of?
This is a ceiling in a section of the house. Again, that glare is sunlight coming through. Water damage, smoke damage, singeing, things of that nature. Mold, I would assume, as well.
Did you notice any smell when you first walked into the building?
Yes, quite a strong odor of mold is what it smelled like to me.
And we'll flip to Exhibit 12, the next picture. What's this a picture of?
Just another general picture of the interior of the building. Just showing where the fire occurred, the general state of certain sections of the building. Some sections are better condition than the others. This is one of the worst sections.
It appears that there's a lot of black in this picture. Is that from the fire?
Yeah, I would assume so, yeah.
Moving on to the next picture. Exhibit 13. Is this another room in the building?
Yep, another picture just showing, and also the condition of the building, as well as just general refuse showing that really nothing has been picked up over that 6-year period of time, that things haven't even been cleaned out yet.
And the next picture is Exhibit 14. Again, what is this depicting?
Basically, just more of the same. Ceiling falling down, water damage, smoke damage, fire damage, elemental damage.
Thank you. Was there any evidence within the building that there had been other people or squatters located within the building?
I did find my first visit there in August, I did find a sleeping bag on the floor. There were some bottles and cans around, cigarette butts, things of that nature in one of the rooms.
Now, you mentioned that it was your first visit. Were there subsequent visits to the property?
I did go again a few days, yesterday? Yes, yesterday. Yep.
And would you say that these pictures accurately depict the current condition of the building as of even yesterday?
Yes.
Would you say that this building could be repaired?
It could, but it would cost a fortune. It really wouldn't make sense to do it. And in my opinion, the building is 100 years old. The foundation beneath it is 100 years old. So I really wouldn't recommend doing that at this point. It would just make more sense financially to scrap it and put something new there. But I mean, anything can be done for the right amount of money.
Has Mr. Poulin, over this period of time, requested any permits for improvements to the building?
No.
You mentioned that there have been neighbors that have complained about the property. While you were at the residence taking these pictures, did anyone approach you?
Yes.
And what did they discuss with you?
They were curious about what was going on. They were frustrated because of lack of movement and lack of activity as far as it getting better, concerned with their values of their property, and concerned with safety as well, not knowing if this thing could potentially fall down, people going in and out of it, that type of thing. The building was not secure, doors were wide open, you can just walk right in. So they were concerned and a little frustrated.
Have you communicated with anyone about the cost associated with demolishing this property?
I have.
And what was the estimate that was provided to demolish it?
About $15,000 to $20,000 to demolish and dispose.
I have no further questions for Mr. Bradstreet. I don't know if the councilors would like to reply. Mr. Poulin, would you like to ask Mr. Bradstreet any questions?
The $15,000 to $20,000 includes the cost of getting rid of the refuse?
Correct.
Speak from here.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Bradstreet, and then you'll have an opportunity to provide testimony?
Why didn't I get a phone call if you wanted to meet and walk through the property?
My understanding is that Garth had called you and was supposed to meet you out there.
Can we all,
Okay,
if we're going to have discussions, we have to be at the podium.
Would that help if I get up to the podium?
Yes, sir. That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Len Poulin. I guess asking questions, I was kind of surprised that people were walking through my property that I had secured without my knowledge or even a request to say, hey, can we meet in there and go look? The property's been secured numerous times. I've had trouble with people kicking in the doors. Garth has called me on it. I had police calls before that somebody was in the building. I called, we went over there to look. We re-secured the building. I can't tell you how many times I've gone over there and picked up mattresses, couches, and things that the neighbors have thrown in the yard.
I don't want to interrupt you. You definitely have an opportunity to provide testimony. Do you have any questions for Mr. Bradstreet at this time? If not, we'll both step down and you can present your testimony.
Okay, my question was, why did you go in my building without asking?
Garth called you to meet you there, and you were supposed to show up, and you didn't.
It was probably 10 minutes late that day, and
Okay.
he was gone, and we talked about rescheduling it, but nothing was ever said about you guys going through the building, and at that point, it was locked up.
When we showed up, it was wide open.
Okay, you said you were there yesterday?
I was.
Okay, I had a crew there most of the day. I'm just curious, what time did you talk to any of my guys? Or?
What time were we there? Probably 2 o'clock, was it? Yeah.
Yeah, we met at 2.
Was it 2? Around 2 o'clock, we both went.
Okay. We've had guys there. I just want to make something clear. I'm not trying to duck any responsibility here. When Garth has called me on numerous times over the years with trash in the yard, I've taken care of it. This year he had called about, the windows being boarded up. He said they don't like how the boards look, the plywood that was put over the burned sections of the building. So I sent a crew over there to take care of it, take them down. The intent was to replace the windows.
Do you have any more questions for Mr. Bradstreet?
No, sorry. I gave
No, that's okay. My thought is I can stand aside and...
So as I was saying before I started rambling off the topic, that over the years, since I bought the building, the original intent was to refurbish the building. The building sustained fire damage in the first upstairs floor. That's where you can see the hole through the roof where the firemen cut a hole in it. There's no other fire damage in that building other than that one apartment. I'd like to go back with the pictures to point out a few misleading statements. Okay, there's not trees growing. Okay, why don't we start there? You see the trees over that first floor roof? That's a rubber roof. There's no trees growing through the building. That's a seed that took off on the roof itself. There's no breach of the rubber roofing on that section. You can clearly see where it burned on that forward wall, and that window was taken out, and the scorching on the eaves. Now, structurally, it did not hurt the integrity of the building. The building is incredibly rugged. The foundations are just as square. The building was built in 1914. They knew how to build them back then. There's 4x6s in the ceiling. You could put a bus on that roof, so nothing's going to fall down, and I wouldn't mind to have an engineer to say that if somebody wanted to see it. You could go to the next picture, please. Okay, there's no scorching, no fire. All of those rooms, those were 3 livable apartments before the fire hit the first one. We've opened up windows there to air out, and we threw out a lot of trash. I have multiple thousands of dollars that I spent to try to clean this thing up. You can go to there's also no other breaches in the roof other than that one section that we'll get back to on the front. Okay, can you turn again? Okay, that's the apartment that's where the fire was, and that's the hole that the firemen knocked through it. So any of the water that's come into that building has been through that one hole. I'm not aware of any other breaches in the roof. Go ahead and change. That, I believe, is that one apartment again. Go ahead. And obviously that's where the scene of the crime was. Go ahead and change it. That is the other end of that same apartment. You can see the shovel in the background where some of my crews had cleaned up. We probably brought 8 or 9 tons to Pine Tree Waste. When the people left it, they just left all their stuff, sleeping bags included. I mean, all the mattresses, clothes, kids' toys, they walked away from it. Go ahead and change it again, please. Again. Okay, I think we've seen them all. But I'd like to ask Garth, the times you've called me in the past about trash, things like that, I thought I was fairly attentive to it.
You've gone out with Glenn and mowed the lawns when I've asked you to, but I've always had to call you. And it's just like this right here in August. The lawns hadn't been mowed until we went over there and did this report. And then you went over and took care of the lawns. So guys, the biggest question is, why didn't you just take care of the stuff? We discussed this in the past.
Well, I disagree with you because I've had crews mowing the lawns all summer because we mow the J&S car wash facility, and I have them do that as part of the loop. So it's had regular attention.
Pictures don't show that in August. Grass that tall.
Yeah, I can get you the documentation. I'm trying to say that I haven't ignored it. Okay, they might not have got mowed because some of the hot weeks in August, you don't mow your lawn if you don't want it to turn brown. So I don't see the lawn being all that, tall there. But again, when you've called me for couches, and
Patty, could you go to picture number 2, please? Or because I assume that's what we're talking about, Garth. Yes.
When was that one taken? Okay, that's the parking lot, by the way. The front lawns have been mowed. I don't know why they didn't mow the back of it. But the stuff visible through the front looked like it was cut. I don't recall it being that long even now, but I don't want to argue points with you. But I just want to point out again that I have not ignored your multiple requests. And I've paid multiple times to take couches and mattresses that were not mine, that got dumped in the yard, and paid to take them to the dump. I even took stuff from the neighbors to help them out. They had mattresses piled up on the dumpsters and whatnot.
We're not disputing that, Len. What we're disputing is why didn't you take care of the building? I sent you the letter. We talked about this. You said you'd get on it.
Well, I pulled all the plywood off the windows because you said that was a point of contention. You know, the few windows out front. You know that those were taken down per your request.
When did you acquire the building, Mr.
It's probably been 4 years now. I don't recall the date.
How many years do you think before you start working on it?
Well, it's a financial thing. You know, I don't have an excess of money, and that changes. Sometimes we have a better year than others. The intent was to do a higher-end restoration of the building because I don't want to be a slumlord. I don't want to be like some of the buildings on that same street where you have all kinds of different activities that are not legal going on. I would rather leave it empty than fall into that category. And I don't mean to sound condescending, but I don't want that. I talked with Kim Lindloff and asked her opinion, and she said there's very little higher-end apartments in town. One of those apartments probably has 4 bedrooms in it, just one apartment. It's huge. So the intent was to try to make a better restoration out of it than just slap it together and paint it and call up the Section 8 people and 16 kids, and, you know, like, you got to look at one bright side. I haven't been a burden on the school system.
Fair to say it's not a priority for you.
What's that?
Fair to say it's not a priority for you.
It hasn't been high on the list. No, it's like I say, it's an investment. You know, it's no different than the Hathaway building by the bridge with the windows knocked out of it. You know, how come nobody's bitching about that? Excuse my language.
Mr. Poulin, I just want to thank you for being here. I understand this is not the most comfortable circumstance to come up here and have these kinds of conversations. And just so we're speaking about fact, to answer John's question, looks like that deed was taken out on June 28th, 2013. It looks like the most glaringly obvious thing here is the hole in the roof. That seems to be the cause of years and years of obviously condensation going into the building. And perhaps I should have asked this from you guys, or I can ask it from you. I mean, Mr. Poulin, I guess I'd get directed to you first. Is the building still structurally sound after that much snow and rain has been in for that many years? You say that it's still very strong. It's hard to believe, and I say this anecdotally. I am not an engineer. I am not a contractor. But it seems as though that would cause, after a fire, 6 years of an open roof and water coming in would have to have some kind of structural damage to the main framing of the.
Could we carry this on before we make any determinations tonight? And I'd like to get Mr. Bradstreet, if you'd like to get somebody else to make an opinion of that. But let me offer this, and this goes along with my intent for the property. Let me close up the hole in the roof, get some windows in the front of it, so you can't see that. There's been windows that have been shattered out by neighborhood kids. Those are easy to fix. But if you look at the rest of the building, other than the scorch marks on the front, you cannot tell that it has any issues. So I'd like to make it appealing so it does not devalue any of the neighbors' properties.
That determination won't be made by me. It'll be made by council tonight. I do think there is a cogent point being brought up here. Have we ever fined the Hathaway owner for his building? Have we argued to take possession of that building? And this is a question for anybody sitting over there, do you feel that we apply the rules uniformly to everybody in the city when it comes to how we handle buildings and enforce codes?
Yes, we do.
Dan, do you feel that way?
I do.
Bill, do you feel that?
I'm not directly involved in these matters except when a particular matter comes before me. So I don't think I can offer an opinion there.
In the case of that one building, since I've been here for the past year, we've not issued a fine for that building. But as a whole, with that one exception, which up until tonight, I've never received any complaint or mention about that.
And how many complaints have you received in regards to Mr. Poolin's property?
I honestly don't know. A couple.
Do you know Mr. Collins?
We average about 3 or 4 from the neighbors every year.
That was 3 or 4 every year from the neighbors was the answer.
And
Thank you,
Mr.
ma'am.
Collins, you heard Mr. Poolin testify in regards to his intent regarding the property. At what point in time did you hear of these intentions? Has this been an ongoing thing that he's intended to improve since his purchase, or is this a recent intention?
No, Len's, his plan was to rebuild the building and turn it into rental units. That was his intent.
So back in 2013, he intended to close up the holes and fix the windows all the way back from 2013 and to date. He still hasn't done that.
Correct.
Okay. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Poolin regarding the vandalism in the property. It sounds like you mentioned that the doors have been broken in on multiple occasions.
Could you go to the microphone?
Apologies. You indicated that the property had been broken into on multiple occasions. Could you describe how often the property has been broken into?
2 times that we've had to fix the front door that was kicked in.
Okay. And do you have any other reason to believe that people have been in the property on more than just 2 occasions?
No, I don't.
No, you don't. You mentioned a whole bunch of mattresses. Were those located on the interior and the exterior?
They were dumped from the lowlifes next door that were infested with bugs, I'm assuming, or they're too lazy to move their furniture when they move out of their deadbeat apartment.
You heard testimony earlier that it appeared as though there were squatters in the property. Is it your opinion that there's no evidence of squatters in the property?
No, there's still all of the furnishings that were there when the people moved out after the fire. Mattresses, the bureaus, photo albums.
If you had such good intentions to repair the property, why over the past 4 years have you not covered the hole that would cause such significant interior and structural damage?
The hole is over the area that's destroyed, so it doesn't bother.
Were you intending to tear down the portion that was destroyed?
I met with a fellow contractor to get his opinion, and he thought that that whole front apartment should come off, because that was added onto that building at one time.
Are you saying you actually intend to demolish a portion of this building?
It's a thought, and I'm exploring it, but it's not that. If you'd like to turn the photos back around, I'll show you the area. See up top, right there? That section was added on, and we talked about taking that off and then just putting a regular truss roof over it.
What was the name of the individual that you contacted in regards to this?
Steve Dosty.
Steve Dosty?
I can give you his phone number if you'd like. We met there the other day along with 2 of my crew.
So when you talked about this, when did you have this conversation with Steve Dosty?
Well, I've had it with him more than one time over the years, but again the other day because I knew I had to come here and have some answers.
So you're saying you've had these conversations with Steve Dosty for years and yet you've done nothing on the property?
Correct.
I have no further questions.
Is this house insured?
I believe it's covered under my business liability policy, so yes. So if anybody gets hurt on it, I'm responsible. That's why we've had it locked up.
I mean, so if kids were to, go that were playing in the area and went into that house and fell through a hole or something,
yeah,
you're responsible and you have insurance?
Yes, and I can probably get that proved if you'd like a copy of it. But there's no way, unless somebody kicks in the door, and they had to work hard at it, because we had put a 2x4 on the back side of it to press it. Unless nobody kicks the door in, there's no way into the building. It is secure that way. They just can't.
Yesterday, right?
You'd have to probably climb up fairly good to get to those windows.
So there are other ways to access the interior of the property other than through the door?
Excuse me?
There are other ways to access the property other than through the door?
You could go through any one of those windows if you were good enough.
What about the basement windows?
None of the basement windows are broken.
Well, Len, the properties that you do own, is this the one that is not only low on the priority list, but is this the worst one that you have?
That's definitely the worst one. It was bought as an investment. I didn't have the finances to throw $100,000 at it to bring it up to snuff. And that's the only reason I haven't done anything with it. I didn't want to do it halfway and deal with a certain clientele. I want to get past that. My friend that owns the building behind me, Eric Hall, did some significant renovations to his building just recently for that same reason, because a lot of the past tenants of his building dumped their crap on my building, in my yard. So, no, I don't. Otherwise, we would not be here. And I say that with sincerity. $1. And I've been paying taxes on it, probably not always on time for the same reason why it's not fixed, but we have been paying taxes and we have not been a burden on the taxpayers other than, and I'm sorry for the neighbors to have to, deal with it, but I've tried to be a good neighbor on the same token. Whenever I had a phone call, we tried to attend to it.
As things get older, they deteriorate. Just like we do. We get older, we start getting our joints and everything. But anyway, no. If you don't have the funds to redo the building now, how much longer is it going to be until you get those funds? Because that building is going to get worse and worse and worse every year, and it will fall down eventually.
Yeah. Well, I disagree with it getting worse and worse every year. That whole area that whole neighborhood's built on sand, so the foundation's not moving. They're not pushing in because of the lack of heat. The only thing that was bothering is that one hole in the roof. And again, I will correct that. That way we won't have to talk about that.
However,
hopefully I don't have to talk about it again.
The water damage that has already been established in the house, that's not going to get any better. It's going to continue rotting.
Yeah, that's just that one area that's burnt. It has to be ripped out anyways.
So all the water damage came from that one area. When the fire occurred, did they shut the water off to the house right after? Or did they let the pipes go through the winter? So,
yeah. I'm not sure on mold in there, and the water hasn't been in there since I've owned it.
Yeah, sorry. So the...
All right, please, everybody, one turn at a time.
So the water may have not been shut off right off after the fire. It went through some winters, which could have caused the pipes to burst to flood the basement and other areas of the house.
The water was turned off after the fire, just as with the rest of the utilities.
Yeah,
there's not even a water meter in the house. There's never been one since I bought it. And I want to say I bought it within a year of the fire.
First, my question is for you. It states Mr. Poulin did not, it says did not appear at the hearing, so I guess I'm trying to figure out whether he did or didn't appear.
He did appear. We weren't sure if he was going to appear or not, so we gave the councilors the opportunity to edit the order and just basically circle who was present and who wasn't.
Oh, okay, at this hearing. This isn't, I thought, I wasn't sure if this was in reference to something else here. Okay, so that answers that. Mr. Poulin, do you have any questions for the City Council?
Well, I'd just like to not have my building condemned, if you would, and declared dangerous. I'm kind of a little blindsided by when I got served with the paperwork, because other than missing the last meeting with Garth, I did not know that we were coming to this point. Every time I got a phone call, I attended to the complaint that he had mentioned. So, it feels like I'm getting violated, that I bought something and invested in it, and it's like a savings account to me. Right now it's not worth much, but to duplicate what's there is much more expensive than what it's going to cost to repair it. And then the income for that building, that's why I haven't taken that one apartment out of it, because you figure you can get probably $800-900 a month. That's $10,000 a year per apartment. Times 4, there's $40,000 a year. So it doesn't take long in numbers to make it pay for itself. But it's just been the lack of available funds to fix it right now. So I'm just sitting on it, just like putting money in a savings account. So I want to address the issues that are contentious, the windows, the hole in the roof, so that way nobody knows that it's not finished.
And in your estimation, is there a dangerous mold problem?
Not that I'm aware of. We've been in and out of it. My employees have been in and out of it. And I'd like to know how the neighbors know that there's mold in my building.
Has anybody actually done any testing to prove that there is mold, or are we just speaking anecdotally based off smells? Have you seen mold, or is there just a smell?
For myself, I can't differentiate between what's mold and what's scorched and burnt. There is a strong odor of what to me smells like mold, along with a lot of water damage.
I'm going to reference code enforcement and Joe on this with the police department. In your opinion, professional opinion, is the safety of this building an issue with youth in the area?
The safety of the building, that's an issue.
And Joe, do you recall anybody from the police department as far as logs in the vicinity of this building in reference to squatters or homeless people, or is there drug paraphernalia going on over there? Is there, we know all about derelict buildings and vacant buildings is one of the biggest, to me, outside of taxes, I think blights and vacant buildings are the #1 issue in the city that residents just don't have a stomach for. And I certainly don't. So, you know, the devaluation of properties in and around this, I want to know, is there a criminal activity in there? Have you been called over there? Is there any kind of record that we need to know about?
Well, that typically happens in a lot of abandoned buildings where people go in there and they will squat. For me to really answer that question, I'd like an opportunity just to search on that particular property in our record management system so I could pull up any calls for service there. There certainly could have been, but that I necessarily wouldn't get that information on a daily basis. Hey, there was a squatter in the abandoned building, unless there was something much more to it. But again, for me to be accurate, I'd want to research that.
You talked about the property being like a savings account for you. Would you agree that your neighbors' homes are also like their savings accounts, and that the value, if they were to sell that home, would not go as much as they would like because of that property?
Absolutely, and that's why I've sent people over there to clean it up, and we've spent a lot of money taking stuff to the dump, and then we've mowed it numerous times, and I can pull out the documentation to back that up if you'd like.
And just one final question from me. If you live next to a building like that, would you like waking up every day to see that?
Well, the building, other than the scorched windows, doesn't look much different than it did before. You know, it's got the same siding, the same roofing. And again, who's to judge what my building's supposed to look like? I mean, you know, this is not Beverly Hills. You know, I don't have trash. I can drive around the corner and there's trash piled up, there's junk cars. I even paid to have somebody's junk car hauled off that got abandoned on the other corner of it. You know, so I have not been shucking, however you want to say it, my obligations. And again, I'm kind of blindsided tonight by we're going to have a vote to condemn my building.
You were provided with notice in early September regarding this hearing.
Right, and that's why I'm here tonight, because I'm kind of blindsided by this action.
Well, Mr. Pullen, again, I don't have a vote here, but I think this is going to be my last question. It's a very difficult topic because we are dealing with property rights, and that's something I take very seriously, and I take your property rights seriously as I take the neighbors. Appreciate that. Very much so. At the same time, we have a property maintenance ordinance, and we have a lot of the codes and things we have that were there in the books when you bought the property, specifically because people's homes is their largest investment. Now, you have brought up a lot of cogent points this evening, like the fact that if I drive around the city, there are homes with dumpsters that are piled over. There's a lot of issues that lay on the city's shoulders that we have not, I guess. I mean, I don't know that we go around looking for those. We deal with it on a complaint basis. Is that correct? Okay, on complaints. But we're not, I mean,
if we see something, we don't have a lot of spare time to drive around and patrol looking for things like that. But if we do catch it, we address it.
But so I'm trying not to, deal with the emotion of the topic and just be. At the end of the day, what do you see as a realistic timeline that you could bring this fully into compliance?
Let me ask you this. What I would like to do is have it like Gus suggested. He says, I don't care what it looks like inside.
I'd like to replace the windows out front, remediate any of the visibility from the singeing on the upper sides of those front windows. I thought you people were green people, but I'll take the tree down. You want the tree gone? But I could do that within the next month, if not sooner, because I don't want to have this conversation again. So I'd like to ask that you.
I just have a couple other questions.
Go ahead.
Can we click forward to 3? It was asked earlier whether or not children would have access to the building. And you said that the doors were boarded up.
Correct.
Is that a door?
Second floor. That's
Is that second floor?
Second floor window.
Okay, the next one?
That's also the second.
Is that also the second floor?
Yes.
And do we see is there an outside perspective of how far up?
Go back to the front view. You could go back one. Right there. There's just no way anybody could get in there without a ladder.
And also, if you look to the second page, or the second picture, these all look, it's hard to tell because the grass is so overgrown.
Is that a basement?
Yes, it is.
Is that secure?
Yes, it is. So it's not any more difficult to get into that as it is any of the neighbors' houses. The windows are all, it's secure at that level. So what I'd like to ask is that if I can correct the things to code enforcement satisfaction and the neighbor's satisfaction, as far as the visual end of things, I'd like to have that opportunity before my building is declared a dangerous building.
Can you turn your microphone on? Sorry.
Can we define what satisfaction means?
Guy with a purple shirt. Mr. Collins. Well, then you'll be easier to please then. Than Mr. Bradstreet then, if that's acceptable.
I would think that you would need to replace all the windows, because what if you just replace the ones on the street side? Kids can still go around to the other ones.
Well, they can't get in them. They're all, the windows are, their integrity is there. We opened up a bunch of the windows when we were doing the cleaning, and also it helped air out the house, which smells much better than it did when I bought it, and the other units that didn't have the fire damage.
But every side has windows that are missing.
No, they're there. They're just open. So I would, any of the windows that are, any things that are not satisfactory, I would correct.
Folks, he's suggesting things upward. Folks feel about that. If you don't want to do that, we'll vote.
Councilors, I suggest that we have an opportunity for the public to speak, because I know there are a lot of neighbors and we haven't heard from those individuals yet.
I have one question, both attorneys. Is it by state law there is a process that you have to go through? They're a dangerous building, obviously. To this point, what comes before this when he has to have a hearing? How many complaints?
To the best of my knowledge, there's nothing specific in regards to the amount of complaints they found that might.
Yeah, could you say?
There's no statutory requirement in regards to how many complaints have to be brought to the city's attention.
Or a timeline, like how many years and
no,
occupied?
And of course there can be circumstances where a building immediately comes in a condition where it's considered a dangerous building. The requirements are essentially that all of the people who have an interest in the property are served reasonable notice of this hearing. And I believe we provided that because Mr. Poulin was provided notice on September 6th, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. And all of the title holders were also provided with notice. In addition, I think that he was given ample opportunity over the years to make repairs and made representations that he was going to do so, and he did not. So he's probably given more notice than most people in these circumstances to try to make improvements before reaching this point.
Now, was he getting fined $100 a day as of May 1st? That letter?
I would direct that question to Mr. Bradstreet. He was not actually being fined.
I think it makes sense at this point, since we know we are going to hear from the neighbors, that we invite the neighbors to come up and just tell us your name for the record and where you live. And Mr. Poulin, I'm going to leave it up to you if you would like to either stay here and speak after each one of them, or if you'd like to just come up afterwards and address all the testimony as a whole. I'll leave that up to you, sir. I think that's quite all right. We'll let people come up and they can each take their turn. Who is here from the neighborhood that would like to speak? We want to make sure you have a chance to speak.
Test, 1, 2.
There he is.
Anthony George, Ward 6. I had a question for the code enforcer. Is it Dan Bradstreet? Is it, those pictures you took of the inside, when was that taken? This month? August. He was inside the building? And you are a public official for Waterville? And did you have a search warrant to go in there? That still gives you the right to walk into someone's property without a search warrant?
I knocked on the door, no one was there, he was supposed to meet us.
So if I was home and I wasn't there and the door's unlocked, you could walk in there?
It's an abandoned house, it's an abandoned building.
So if I...
If it's potential
There's a law that says...
Yes, if there's potential danger, yes.
What's the main statute on that?
I don't know the name of it, but I can send it to you if you'd like.
I would like that. I'll meet
Sure.
with you afterwards. I don't think you should have gone into your property without a search warrant.
My name is Brenda Bass, and I live at 26 Western Avenue. So if you go back a couple of screens, I get the Western Avenue view every time I pull out of my driveway. My house is currently for sale, so I feel I have a vested interest in this meeting because I would like to see some major improvements or even a nice green space. Sorry, no. I know. That could go. You could keep the tree on the right, the rest could go. But, it's been 5 years that he's owned the property, and 6 since it's been burned. Somebody said 2 today. And, she has to look at the side of it, on the left, and she's looking at right. And
I'd like to just make sure we're one at a time, so then it will get a little too confusing.
yeah, and, I just think it's time. I think it's, and the integrity of the building is going to be disintegrated over time. And no matter, I know he doesn't want to agree with that, but water, and it sits and it rots the wood and it creates a problem, and the building is going to, he's saying he doesn't even have the money to do it, and it's going to be years before it's done. By the sound of it, it's going to be $100,000 to just fix it up and get it back to a place where you can rent it out. And I rent a building. I live in a building that, I have to work at it constantly. Every single month, I have to put money back into that building to keep it up so I can keep it rented and I can afford to pay my bills and keep it, going. So if he wants to be a landlord and invest in property, then that's what has to happen, is you have to put the money into it every month. You have to work at it, and you have to put extra money into it and fix it so it looks good, and then start on the inside and fix it up. It's just part of being a responsible property owner.
Okay. If we have the next person, and could you just step a little closer to the microphone, who is ever next, because we are having a hard time
My
hearing.
name is Doris Matthew. I live 17 Western Avenue. And yes, when Mr. Poulin says he did help some of the neighbors, he did with me this summer. My husband passed, and I was doing some repair work, and he did haul off a lot of trash for me. And last summer, there was a camper that was parked there that he let stay there. The cops were there maybe two or three times a week, allowed music. When he bought the property, I don't know if the people that owned it before had told him. They had the electricity shut off, they had their oil taken out of the tank. They never shut the water off. Next spring, I happened to look out to my husband, and he said, oh, look, they're going to do some work on the house. The water district was there. They turned the water off. They went to go down the cellar to get the rest of their equipment. The water was that deep, and nobody pumped it out, so that water set, and it set in and it sunk in. And, yeah, he has done a lot of work this summer. He has picked up all the wood. And people have broken. I have called him. I've called him a couple of times. doors were wide open, and people broke in.
Then I called the police, and she called.
Yes, and I was out there when the police got there, and I gave them his phone number, and they called him, and like last summer, like I said, the police were there quite a bit because of the campus. And that's why he hauled some of my trash there to make it a little easier for me with all the inconvenience. And I found the last couple of weeks there, last month, I've had a couple of dead rats in my dooryard. I've seen some mice. I don't dare let when my great-grandchildren come over, I don't dare let them go out. What if there's rats out there? And I'm assuming they're coming from there. I don't know. Okay?
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm Kim Kruke, and I live on the driveway on the right, on the left, I mean, and it's, even with my window shut, right now, it smells like a giant ashtray, and it's a lot. I've seen through the windows, it's awful in there. I mean, throughout the whole house. And there have been squatters I've seen at night, light on in there, I don't know, a candle or I don't know what, and they're coughing, and it's scary to live next to that. Was it this last summer? No, I didn't call. I was on the way to work. But I'm just saying, there was a camper there all summer with people, a baby, dogs on this side of it. And I don't know what they were doing there, but they were there for a long time. And it's a disaster.
Mr. Pullen, would you acknowledge or would you refute that somebody who lives right next door
I've lived there for 58 years.
Has the smell of your home, has the smell of that home?
It's the first I hear of it.
But you would know going next, I mean, you would know going next to the building if that was the case or not.
Like I say, it's the first time I've heard of it.
But I'm not asking if you've heard of it. I'm asking if you would agree from your presence on the property if that would probably be the case.
It's probably the case.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Jake Weller, Ward 5. I'm not your neighbor, sorry. There's more than a few missing pieces of window, right?
Right.
I mean,
The upstairs.
okay.
The other one's
I also agree that nobody should have been on your property. However, if Garth says something's sort of messed up, I've dealt with Garth with other buildings. I sort of have to defer to what he's saying. My only real question is, why is this not happening in a courthouse? Why is it here? And do we open the city up to a lawsuit if we destroy this man's property?
You can appeal to a
This decision can be appealed, but I believe this is the correct legal process. It has to start here because it is our local enforcement that's enforcing local law.
But he's been fined for this property, right?
This is the governing body of the city for which you are running for.
I love it. November, not till November. But and that's partly why I'm asking questions. I want to make sure that we're not opening ourselves up to some sort of litigation if you vote to destroy this property without fines going through, I understand that you've had it for 5 years. I mean, something on the roof would probably go a long way towards getting them to let you do stuff on that property.
Would our legal counsel or code enforcement like to come to the podium and speak into the microphone and answer that question? As far as legal procedure and process.
Title 17, Section 2851, dealing with dangerous buildings, authorizes
this is your answer, so I'd listen.
The municipality, through the municipal officers, to make a determination as to whether or not a building is dangerous as defined in subsection 2 of that statute, and if so, to determine what action needs to be taken, which could be repair, could be making a determination that it's not repairable, looking at it from a cost-benefits standpoint, and in order to be torn down. The municipality also then sets a time period for either those repairs or the demolition to occur. If the owner of that property does not comply with the action as determined by the municipality, then the municipality may take that action, and the cost of it is levied against the property as a special tax. The property owner does have the right to appeal the decision made by the municipal officers to Superior Court within 30 days. So could your decision here lead to legal action? Yes, it could. Is this a proper process that's being followed here tonight? Yes.
Bill, was that
Thank you,
why
Bill.
the notice of violation served on this individual back on 19?
No, that was dealing with, I believe they were trying to get the property, have some repair work done, and when nothing was done, then the matter was referred to me 4 months later, and inspection by the code enforcement officer of the building at that time, they made the determination, in their opinion, as they've expressed here, that this is really not repairable. And now, but you make the final that's an opinion being expressed. You make the determination here based on the evidence which has been presented this evening.
So after, if for demolition of the building, after we charge this individual costs demolition, something in here, 15,000, does he in fact own the nice vacant lot?
He would still be the legal owner of the land, subject to the assessment that would be imposed upon it, yes.
Essentially what he's going to be doing, 15,000 for a nice lot on that. That's what it costs to tear it down.
Yes. And the determination as to how to proceed here, remember I said, number one, do you find the building to be dangerous? Number two, if you do, what remediation do you feel is necessary based on the evidence that has been presented here this evening?
Yes, Council.
Can I ask a question of Brad?
Of course you can.
Thank you. So it's my understanding that there is debate over whether or not the building is repairable. You say that you have an interest in repairing it, and you have stated that it could be repaired if there was an infinite amount of money available. My question is whether or not you have found the building structurally unsafe and unstable.
That's difficult to determine with certainty.
Okay.
Now, if this is going to be used as a multi-unit building, multi-family building, as is his plan, I would prefer to see an engineer go in there and really do an evaluation, because there's been such an accumulation of water through there over the years. And it's a 100-year-old building, and we're talking 6 years of being exposed to the elements. So I wouldn't want to live in a building like that unless it was approved by an engineer. So I can't make that determination with certainty.
Did you inspect the basement when you did the?
I did not dare to go in the basement, no.
Okay. Did you inspect the third floor apartment?
Yes.
So you were able to reach that apartment once you gained access to the interior of the building. And did you notice damage to any of the structural beams and?
Oh yeah, there's singeing, there's fire damage. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is between the first and second floor, you have water coming down, you have sheathing that's over the joists. And now there's a hard ceiling, so water has stayed in that cavity all that time for 6 years, rotting those joists potentially. I don't know unless you look at them. I would assume, yes. I mean, it's very soft walking up there.
So you can attest that there has been 6 years of water damage to the structure of the building, but you have not determined whether or not that has in fact deteriorated the structure.
Not with 100% certainty, no.
Do you have any certainty? I'm not asking that to be belligerent. I'm asking because I want to make sure that we're not speaking, I want to make sure that we're speaking very factually here. It's very, very important.
Right, and that's why I say with 100% certainty. I would prefer to have an engineer look at it to evaluate it, so I could have that certainty.
Can I add something?
Yes, sir.
I'd be more than happy to provide that to alleviate concerns that is not structurally sound. And the area on, can you flip a few photos? I want to point out something.
when you get to the sunshine. Keep going. Right there. That's where the firemen had ripped the ceiling down, the unit that had the fire. They peeled the ceiling back to make sure there was no fire in between it. But again, if somebody, if they need to see an engineer to say that building's not falling down. Now, the other thing on the water damage is just over that one hole, not the whole building. That is a huge building. There's 3 other apartments that have no water damage whatsoever. So that needs to be considered too if you're trying to condemn the building. It's just the one unit that I'm considering removing.
Prior owner? Fire hit?
He hit the lottery. He paid $100,000 and he got $280,000 payoff.
Those?
Yep. He had me go look about dismantling it because I plowed for him. His name is Will Garrett. He owns multiple properties in town. They own a lot in Augusta, I guess. And he asked me one time while I was doing some of his commercial plowing in the winter, he says, anybody does demolition? I says, yes, we do that. We tear down houses as a part of our day-to-day things. So I went to look at it, and I was pretty impressed with the house, other than the fire damage for that one unit.
That's why he got $280,000 because.
Well, yeah, the insurance company thought that.
Right.
But the rest of the house is quite solid. Foundation is not a thing wrong with it. I tore one down for a customer on Summer Street, and we tore the whole top of the house off. We reused the foundation and the deck, and he built a new house on top of it. This has 95% of its structure is still fine. And I'd like to get an engineer to back that up, not just my opinion. And I'm an engineer, by the way.
Can I ask a point of clarification? You've said that the damage is restricted to the top floor apartment, but given that the floor of the top apartment is the ceiling of the second floor apartment, how can you ascertain that there has been no damage?
Because
to that?
you can get in the basement, all of the big beams, and the houses in that era were built probably twice as rugged as the codes require now. And you can see all of the beams. There's no soft spots in any floors. The only soft spots he probably got was walking over the burnt mattresses upstairs from that one crispy unit. But you can see, and the only damage that I noticed from the water is the hardwood floor in that lower unit right below. The hardwood floor is buckled. And that's just the sheathing of the floor. That's not the structure of it.
There is damage in the second floor, below
The first floor.
Okay.
Yes.
There is also damage.
Yeah, it's more of a cosmetic thing. It's not a structural issue. And there was more damage done from the copper thieves that stole the plumbing, ripped wiring out of the wall, which, the intent is to rewire it and replumb it anyways, but they did some damage tearing stuff out. To get $1 worth of copper, they did $50 worth of sheetrock damage. And as far as the water that was in the basement before I bought it, that whole neighborhood is sand, and the basement has got big granite posts, and there's a sump in the corner, and water does not stay in that basement. And as far as rats and rodents, usually they go for food, so I don't think there's any food in there, unless you open up one of those fridges, which I would not advise.
Okay. Mayor?
Yes.
If I may, since there's some question raised about what is a dangerous building, I'll read the statutory provision.
Could you please come up to the microphone?
Sure.
Thank you.
Title 17, MRSA Section 2851, subsection 2, which defines a standard for a building to be determined to be a nuisance or dangerous. One of the means is by finding it to be structurally unsafe, unstable, or unsanitary. There are several other criteria that can be used to determine that it is dangerous or a nuisance. One would be it constitutes a fire hazard. Another one would be that it is unsuitable or improper for the use or occupancy to which it is put. Another one would be constitutes a hazard to health or safety because of inadequate maintenance, dilapidation, obsolescence, or abandonment, or is otherwise dangerous to life or property. So you're dealing with sanitary issues, you're dealing with occupancy issues, and if you'd like, I'll read that again. Number one, structurally unsafe, unstable, or unsanitary. In other words, if you just on the unsanitary category alone, you could make a determination. Just on the unstable or condition, you could find it to be dangerous. Or if it constitutes a fire hazard, or if it is unsuitable or improper for the use or occupancy to which it is put, or it constitutes a hazard to health or safety because of inadequate maintenance, dilapidation, obsolescence, or abandonment, or is otherwise dangerous to life or property. So this is a standard which has multiple ways for you to make a determination, and it is your determination, and whether you determine it to be something that can be remediated within a certain period of time, you have the power to set that. If you make the determination that first of all, you could decide that it's not dangerous, and then you wouldn't get to the second criteria. But if you do find that it fits within one of the criterion of being dangerous under this statute, your second test is to decide what has to be done based on the evidence that you've heard here this evening, which could be repair and defining what those repairs would be within a certain period of time, or you could make the determination that it is beyond repair and therefore it has to come down, and you would set the period of time during which that would have to occur. Does that clarify the concept of dangerousness?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Scott, have you been to the podium yet?
No, I've been trying to get up.
Okay, and this will probably be our final commentary from the public, and I'm going to move to ask the council after this if they have any further questions, and then we'll move.
Scott McAfee, Ward 7. I just want to ask the city when we're going to bring back our nice attorney and go after, because what Mr. Lee just said to us, first of all, goes after at least 2 big industrial buildings I know that are a lot far worse than his. Been sitting there for one's been sitting there for almost 20 some odd years, falling apart, structurally collapsing. When are we going to start going after some of these other businesses and leave this guy who's trying to fix them up and others that have just left them? You know, to me, this has become a witch hunt. You know, what we need to do is, in that case, if we're going to go after him, let's go after Harris Bakery. I know they're trying to fix it up, but let's start going after the former Boys and Girls Club. Let's go after half the other buildings. I remember we ended up making a committee to go after this years ago, which was shot down by the council. We gave you papers just in the south end of buildings that needed to be torn down, that were run down, structurally deficient. Why all of a sudden, out of the clear blue, do we decide just all of a sudden, oh, hey, we're going to go after this gentleman who's obviously trying to work on it, from what I can see, and why aren't we going after the big ones like Harris Bakery, the big companies that are actually structurally deficient, falling down, that are a hazard? And I believe you look at Harris Bakery, there's been evidence in the paper of people going in there, squatting, setting fires in that building. If that's not dangerous, then I don't know what is. So I would suggest, basically, if you're going to declare his building unsafe, let's bring in the other buildings. Let's bring the owners of the other buildings in, and let's put them through this as well, and leave this poor guy alone, and let's give him a chance to fix up his building.
All right, so the council, I'm going to give you guys a last chance if you have any questions or comments, and then we'll move to your decision, which will be if you're going to set some kinds of parameters around repair, or whether you're going to just vote in the affirmative of the resolution. And Mr. Poulin, if you have any final thoughts or commentary.
I'd just like to add that if you guys give me a chance to tune it up, we won't have this conversation again. Thank you.
I guess my thoughts would be that if integrity timeline for that, and it needs to be protected if we go that.
It's my opinion on the testimony that the building is dangerous, but I do believe, according to what Attorney Bill Lee has stipulated out of the reasoning and rationality of it, I do think it should be, I do believe in second chances. I do believe that Leonard should be, at the same time, even though I do term this building as a dangerous building based on safety and the code enforcement, the practicality that it's been 6 years. There's a lot of different parameters that we're looking at here. If I do believe we should make it a pivotal decision to have an outside engineer take a look at this, I do believe that the windows need to be repaired. I do believe that the building needs to be secured from the whole outside. And we need to set a time limit for repairs and be very adamant about that time limit. I do believe that Leonard does deserve to have a shot at remedying that and taking care of that and presenting follow-up at another council meeting within this year.
Well, I think we need to, hopefully we're talking about less than a year.
Yeah, absolutely. No, within this year, I said, which is not much
I would say
left.
2 weeks would be predictive in
Wouldn't
5
you,
years.
Sydney, would you agree, you apparently you wouldn't, but that he has had ample time getting calls every year since he's owned the building to fix this up and all the complaints? I mean, if he's had a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance.
Can I?
Yes, you can answer that, Mr. Poole.
Okay, the calls that I've had, Mr. White, I've taken care of the trash, and things of that nature, mowing the lawn. I've never had a letter saying change the windows or fix the roof. You know, this is the point we're at tonight.
Did you tell the code enforcement department that you would do that?
I told them I intended to do
Multiple
that, yes.
times you've told them that you would do that?
Yeah.
Okay. I make a motion that we find this building dangerous.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of the motion?
And I also move that we require the homeowner to tear down the building.
Second.
All in favor?
You do realize this is going to incur a lot of legal costs for both of our sides. So think about that. Ask Mr. Massey that question.
What was that, Lenny? A time period needs to be established.
You want to do that here?
We're not going to get into this here. We're not going to have that kind of drama in here, thank you.
If it is the council's determination that the building must, that Mr. Poulin must tear down the building, you need to set a time period for that to occur. In other words, within so many days, so many months, whatever it may be. What was written in just draft findings for your consideration was a 30-day period. As I said at the very beginning, you're not bound by that. We wanted to have something before you for your consideration. You make the actual determination yourself.
I would amend my motion to make it a 60-day notice.
I just want to be clear here because we are talking about legalities and I want to make sure we're doing things right. Because there's a time period to get the building torn down and there's a time period to have, it looks like a time period to appeal the decision unless that's set in law 30 days regardless.
The appeal period is 30 days from your decision.
30 days from today, no, regardless.
Right.
Okay.
Right. You could decide to be torn down in 30 days. You could say it have to be torn down in 6 months. That would not affect the appeal period.
Well, practicality will, because if he appeals it, it stays everything.
That is correct.
So our 60 days doesn't begin to run until it 6-month appeal gets done.
Until there would be a final determination. Correct.
Counselor, did you want to finish making that motion?
Yeah, I just motioned to give the homeowner 60 days to take care of this building.
All in favor? Okay. We are now moving on to new business to resolution 166, 2018.
Move to read by title only, please.
Second.
Hold up.
Okay, for clarification, make sure the council is adopting the resolution as presented with one amendment to it, which says that it is to be torn down within 60 days or then it will, and it goes on to say, and if the homeowner does not do that, then it will be torn down by the municipality and so forth. So you,
Correct. It was the only thing that was changed was the number of days.
And you also then should specify under the findings of fact that Mr. Poulin did appear, because it says did or did not, and then it has different parties and interests that did or did not appear.
We'll leave that to the city clerk.
Well, I think it's important to be established that Mr. Poulin did appear and that none of the other parties in interest did appear, and so there could be a friendly amendment, not friendly, but an amendment to that resolution to state that Mr. Poulin did appear and that all the other interested parties did not appear, and then it would be written up that way for signature.
Okay, I'll amend that and state that Mr. Poulin did appear, the other parties did not appear, and we gave him 60 days to take care of the building.
Move motion is amended.
No, first you have to second the motion.
Second.
All in favor? And can I get a motion to move as amended?
Move as amended.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Next, we will move on now to Resolution 166, 2018.
Move to read by title only, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Okay, where are we?
A resolution providing for referral to the planning board.
Move to adopt.
Second.
That was referral to the planning board, Front Street. Mike, could you tell us about this referral to the planning board, please?
There, I think my mic's on now.
Pull it right up. Get comfy.
Okay, this good? All right. This resolution is to refer to the planning board the question about Hedda Falls property and the idea of the city developing a lot or selling a lot for development. Presently, the property is zoned commercial A, and the discussion has been that maybe a contract zone designation would be more favorable, city being able to control the uses. I know that has some thoughts on that too. So this is simply to refer it to the planning board for a discussion to happen at that level, then it comes back to you.
Right, and so everyone knows we do have a committee that is meeting to discuss what that development looks like at the Hedda Falls. I want to thank particularly Councilor Tate for moving that along and pushing this forward and getting us here today. So thank you very much for that. That way we can start to move. We are in process of looking at putting together an RFQ or an RFP for that site, but we need this in order to start that public discussion of what exactly the parameters are and what can be built down there. Refer to the planning board so we can have that discussion there, and then if it needs to be rezoned to its own category, we can do that. Yeah, of course.
I just wanted to say that all of the members of the Hedda Falls subcommittee have been working hard on this, and we're very excited that this is moving forward. We're thrilled that the River Walk, which will be inaugurated this Saturday, is making that property so much more of an attractive property. We think this is a very opportune time to release a call for development proposals, and I think we're all thinking very seriously about what the best way is to move forward on that. Our conversations in the committee were that the place to have the discussion about whether or not it makes sense to change the zoning ordinance needs to happen at the planning board. There are pros and cons for both sides, but that this is an important part of the discussion as we move forward to sending out the calls for development. So just to note that I think this is something that has been long in coming, but we're excited that it's moving.
Is there any questions or commentary from the council on this? Yes.
Yeah, I think this is a very important decision. Like Winifred said, I do believe the Hedda Falls, as I've been saying for a long time, with the money that we invested over a decade ago into that area and the accumulation of what we have now with the Riverwalk in place, the selling or the for sale of this property, this prime time property in the city of Waterville is much more marketable from an economic standpoint with the Riverwalk there. I do believe that this will have direct benefit to the city of Waterville, and I do believe that we should proceed with this as soon as possible.
Sale or lease?
Hey.
Correct. I do say lease, that I do agree with that, yes.
And I know you had some questions on this, so now would be a good time to do that.
Nancy Sanford again, Ward 1. And I just, Nick explained it a little to me before the meeting, so I understand it a little bit better now. But the piece of property that we're talking about would leave some green space on either side. So, because I would encourage, and perhaps the committee did this, to take a look at Bucksport's Riverwalk. It's beautiful, and I think is a good balance between green space and building. So I'll just offer that at this point.
Encourage you to go to the.
Yeah.
Speak to them.
Yes, I will.
But I will say, if it makes you feel, I think there were some of us on this committee who would have just built the whole thing out, and there were some people who would have left the entire thing green space. And I think having that diversity of view brought us to a fairly good place. So I do hope you attend those meetings. It's going to be important to stay plugged in the whole way through, because once it goes there, it comes back here, and so we'll move this along. So
thanks. I will be there.
Great, thank you, Nancy. All right, we'll call for a vote. All in favor? Next is Resolution 167, 2018.
Move to read by summary only.
Second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for referral to the planning board. Summary: Philip Roy, AJMA Incorporated, and John Goodine are requesting that the City Council rezone 3 parcels, 257 and 259 Main Street and 11 Hillside Avenue, Assessor Map 52, parcels 306, 307, and 308, from residential C to commercial A.
Stood up.
Second.
Is there any discussion on this? All in favor? That was another just move to the planning board. And we have one more, Resolution 168, 2018.
Move to read by summary only again, please.
Second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for referral to the planning board. Frederick Fisher is requesting that the City Council rezone 315 Main Street, Assessor Parcel 57-101, from Commercial B and Residential B to Commercial A in its entirety.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor? Resolution 169, 2018.
A resolution providing for grading and erosion control plan approval. Be it resolved by the Waterville City Council acting as municipal officers that the City Council hereby authorizes the police chief to spend up to $15,000 for the preparation of design plans for the former Wyandotte Lagoons to include a grading drainage plan and a sedimentation erosion control plan as requested by the Department of Environmental Protection as further described on the attached memo. The funds needed for these plans would come from the police department's drug forfeiture expenditure line.
Move to adopt.
Second.
In a moment, ma'am, I'm going to have the chief come up and speak, and then we'll have the council ask questions, and we will open it to the public.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. The lagoon was identified as probably the only spot in the city that we could locate a firearms range on. Several years ago, Councilor Fred Stubbert was very much involved in us taking a look at all city-owned property to find a suitable place where we could have a firearms range, and we determined that probably the lagoon was the best place. We realized that we'd need a lot of fill hauled into that particular area. And so we were fortunate enough to have the big project at Colby where the contractor agreed to haul a lot of fill for us. We got an initial cost from one of the city engineers. If we were to have the fill hauled in, he figured out what the cubic yards would be based on the length and the width and the height of the berms that we needed at about $250,000. We think that we probably saved 2/3 of that cost by having the contractor bring in all the fill that's there, build the road so that he could get it to the back and build it in its present configuration that it's in right now. So that is the only spot in the city that would be suitable for the firearms range. We hope to move forward. The police department really needs its own firearms range. Right now we use Winslow when we pay an annual fee to use that, but there are scheduling problems, other issues, so we're large enough where we really need our own firearms range.
Pay $600 a year?
$600, yes.
5 years. 15 grand is just for what? Time plan?
It's going to be used for erosion control and some grading and some other work that needs to be done.
So there'll be a lot of money on top of that invested.
Well, there will be other monies, yes.
Said initially 200,000, but we think eliminated a couple of that maybe.
About 2/3 of it.
Looking at 7.
Yes.
Top of the 15.
Yes, it could be another $50,000, yes.
Have you thought about where those funds would come from?
Pardon?
Have you thought about where those funds would come from?
I still didn't catch that, man.
Have you thought about where those funds would come from? Since you know after we spend 15, you're going to have to spend another 60 or 70 to build a range.
Right, well, the additional fill that we might need, we're hoping that we can get from another construction project, and I've already talked to that owner who owns the property across the West River Road. And so there are still some possibilities for us to cut that cost further. Mm-hmm. We do have some drug forfeiture money that we think we may be able to apply towards that. But the bottom line is we need a firearms range, and we can't get away from that. We have to qualify, we have to do tactical shooting, and trying to coordinate that at the Winslow range is very difficult because several agencies use it. Because of an increase in homes being built in that area, there's been a lot of complaints about the shooting and the noise. The range is shut down the complete month of November during hunting. So there's some logistical issues. We're a large department, we do a lot of shooting, and we need a range.
How many acres might go across from the wine dock?
I'm sorry, I don't remember. Nick, do you know? Yeah, that would be my guess too. It's over 20 acres.
If we had a shooting range down there, 20 acres?
Largely so, probably. I don't know, would you agree?
Please. Because I think one of the things that we talk about often is how we have all this tax exempt land, and as we talked about recently, a lot of the tax exempt land in the city of Waterville is owned by the city of Waterville. Is this land that would be valuable that we could get rid of, or is it not land that's actually marketable?
No, this is an active lagoon closure site, and I wanted to come up here to explain that. We have obligations through Maine DEP, through our lagoon closure plan from a couple of years ago, to maintain our cap over the current lagoon. Now, we've accepted some fill over the top of that lagoon. Now that fill is considered as part of our cap. So we need to modify our plan over a period of time to be able to tell them that we're going to maintain the cap, and here's our new fill, and this is what we're going to do. So with Chief's request for a firing range, it's completely separate than what I'm dealing with, which is making sure that we're on the straight and narrow with Maine DEP. We need this money to get this done, or else we're going to be facing some questions from Maine DEP.
So this request isn't actually for the firing range, it's for DEP because it's not pitched to us that way.
So there was a letter.
I mean, I realize it's part of a memo, but it's really geared towards putting a firing range there.
Yeah, I think it was a little misleading. I think the article in the paper was misleading as well. we are talking about a location that was part of the fire, to be considered as a firing range in the future. But right now, the situation is we've got a lagoon and a lagoon closure plan that we have to maintain. We've also accepted some fill. We've got to modify the drainage. This is per a September 2017 letter from Maine DEP. It was conversing between the then city engineer Greg Brown and Nick Mayhew over at Maine DEP, essentially conversing with what needs to be done ahead of and basically the process moving forward of what needs to be done. One of those things was we needed an erosion control and drainage plan, which was never provided, so we just need to get that.
So we're not voting on the beginning of a shooting range tonight.
No. No, as far as I'm concerned, Mike,
Right, no, I'm glad you made that distinction, because we should have made it more clear probably in the wording of the resolution.
Or maybe just not put them together.
This is, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. This is the result, tonight's resolution is the result of us getting something in writing from the Maine Department of Environmental Protection saying, based on the amount of fill you folks have brought into the site, you need to control erosion better than what you're doing today. So we've got to make erosion control improvements as a result of the fill we brought in.
Why did we bring the fill in?
Because it was free. We knew that we may be able to use it someday. I mean, Colby had contact, or the contractor building the athletic complex, Colby contacted the city saying, we need to get rid of fill. Do you have any place you'd like to have it? Well, yeah. We actually needed more of a cap on one of the lagoons, so we thought, good, that will give us a thicker cap. And now that we've put that material over the lagoon cap, we need to properly grade it and control erosion.
just to add to that, the previous city engineer, before going through this process last fall, identified and had discussions with Maine DEP of possibly adding 5 feet over the top of the lagoons. And the reason for that is you don't actually get any wooded growth over the top of it. So if you have the fill over the top, you don't actually have to clear the land, so you don't have to mow it every year. As you know, with the landfill that we have to mow every year, it's very difficult to find a contractor that can do it and into a reasonable amount of time, especially with the land area that you have. See, the idea was that we'd put the 5 feet of fill over the top so that we wouldn't have to mow it every year. We put the 5 feet on, we don't have to do it.
Yes, Counselor.
Would it be smart for us to instead, just hold off on this until we get more fill from that other project that he was talking about? Because
we need to act now to show DEP that we're proceeding through their requests.
Are we going to have to do it again once we put more fill on in there?
No, the idea behind this, and so the firm that we've been working with is Ransom Consulting. They were the ones that did the lagoon closure plan, and that's the reason why I went back to them, is because they were dealing with the plan itself, and they're also a civil engineering firm as well. So they understand the ramifications and what needs to be done on the site. So what would be done is some future planning, essentially. If we wanted to do something, what would we have to do here? And they might identify certain slopes that we would need to carry. And a lot of this work we can complete internally with Public Works.
So we could essentially eliminate the paragraph that even refers to the firearms range, because it has nothing to do with it.
Well, except though, this is talking about money from the police chief.
Could I ask a question, please?
I'd like to. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nick, I wanted to ask you a question. Is this land that the city could eventually sell at any time?
Well, I can't answer that question right off the bat. I will say anybody that would purchase that land would have the running deed restrictions, which include the lagoons and anything that any mitigation efforts over the future. I wouldn't buy this land and take on responsibility.
Do those restrictions foreclose construction? They mean that you can't build on this land?
You can use the land. Whether or not somebody would build on it, that would be an entirely different question. You have to do a geotechnical analysis. I wouldn't build over an existing lagoon.
We got 20 acres there. We're not just talking about.
Well, you've got a portion of it that is essentially where the lagoons were, and that's where Chief had cited the firing range. There's other parts of the property that, yeah, absolutely could be used. I mean, you can cut this out, and we could certainly split it off.
But and will the firing range therefore preclude the other construction?
I guess that's left up for opinion. To be quite honest, it's really not a technical opinion either way.
Okay, so now I have some questions for Chief Massey, if I may. How much land do you need for a firing range?
Well, I think the area that we're looking at right now are probably going to encompass 3 acres? About 3 acres. And again, back several years ago when I was working with Councilor Stubbart to identify suitable land, it was the lagoon that we realized was the only land that would actually be able to have a firearms range constructed on it. So we kind of moved forward hoping that someday that it might become that. And to help that process along, I was out there trying to get some of this fill and do some of this work and get that fill for no cost, which we were able to do, again, in hopes that the council in the future would consider this for a shooting range. And so we've been moving forward for the last couple of years, and again, we got some fill from another construction that the state was doing that we had hauled in. We got all the fill from Colby that we had all hauled in, all in hopes that one day it might be a shooting range, because a lot of that land, as Nick just said, probably is not suitable for housing. I don't know who would want to build on a lagoon that had some hazardous material in it that was covered over.
20
so
acres. We're not talking about that 1 acre with a...
Sure, I realize that, Council. That there's
So
more
you're saying that the shooting range could be over the lagoons with the hazardous material, and the other acres, excuse me, could be freed up for possible development by other parties?
The shooting range is right over the North Lagoon.
Okay.
Right on top of it.
Would there be the possibility of opening up the shooting range to the public for a fee or otherwise commercial, bringing up revenue through that?
Well, it was my intent to use that shooting range only for the police department because of our size, because of the number of times we have to shoot. There is an issue of then who's going to open it, who's going to close it, who's going to maintain it. Are people going to use the range that aren't familiar with a weapon and an injury occur, or someone that's not responsible? So a whole bunch of issues with that.
Sure.
And again, we would be in a position where we would be competing for the use of the range, which I'm trying to get away from in Winslow.
You could charge other departments to use it, Waterville taking precedence, though. You know, you schedule your own, and then whatever's available, if another town needs to come in.
Or you could charge membership fees, so you could have a criteria of what kind of members of the public would be using such a range. There's a lot of responsible firearm owners who, if they're paying for firearms range for the city on tax-free land, might want to be able to use it. You don't think there's any way we could do that without interfering with the police department?
Well, again, my intent is to have a shooting range that we're not competing with other entities for, if that's possible.
Can I ask one more question? So you're offering $15,000 from the asset forfeiture money that the police department's received that presumably could go to other projects if it wasn't going to this, right?
Yes.
So do you see this commitment of this money as a commitment on the part of the city to move forward with the shooting range in the future?
Well, again, I would be using that out of asset forfeiture that I generally use directly for the police department. It's an indirect use that we're going to be able to qualify, and we're required by law to do that for us to qualify twice a year. So, yes.
Councilor Mayhew had a question for Nick, and I just want to make sure.
Yeah, Nick, you said this lagoon area, obviously, we're talking about a 1 acre, but we're talking about 19, 20 acres there.
Yeah, and
there's possibility for other uses.
Off the top of my head. I can certainly get the exact number for you.
So again, this city land could ultimately, outside of this 1 acre parks, could become
this particular
a revenue source for the city if it tended to.
This particular site is situated literally right on the banks of the Kennebec, and actually a portion of it comes in. It's almost directly across from. I'm not mistaken, there's a stream that comes out through there. Kind of think of the name of the stream.
Yeah, there's a small stream.
And so, I mean, it's much restricted on the shoreland side. So you have about 75 feet, 250 foot setback for the shoreland zone, 75 foot for structure setback, and then beyond that, the lagoons are kind of situated. If you go down in the property, they're almost situated right along the road. So in order to get by the lagoons, you'd have to have an access road out back. The uses out back there, I mean, I don't know if you'd even want to touch it. If you went out back there, you'd probably see a natural, pristine riverbank, and I'm not sure what type of development would go in down there, especially I could possibly see some with the Trafton Road interchange right down, or right across the way. But it would require some significant improvements to the property.
Hypothetically, could this also be used with some other sources of parcels with land, with leasing through Waterville or solar panels?
Could. I'm not a solar expert, but
hypothetically, that could be a
hypothetically. Sure.
Yeah, and like my question for Joe. Again, I know, Joe, you've been looking to have a firing range for quite a few years. I understand your position on that, and I admire that position at the same time. I do think the sense of the council is to find a budgetary way to make this happen if it's possible to make it happen. But I'm a firm believer, like some, that we have to incur every and all revenue sources that we can to offset costs for the city and keep tax. We certainly would like to think, and I agree with the mayor, that if there's a possibility to have some kind of revenue source with membership fee to have responsible gun owners use that. Obviously, letting departments set the precedent of not only having the firing range and putting drug forfeiture money towards that as a precedent, but the thing about it is that we would want you to have the scheduling preference, of course, but outside of that, I would offer that possibility, that discussion be ongoing.
Can I just try to wrap this up in a nutshell? Correct me if I'm wrong, somebody. We have to do this.
We have to do this. Whatever money we choose.
We have to do this. The $15,000 is in this year's budget? Or is that new forfeiture money? It's forfeiture money that you have.
Forfeiture money.
Correct. And the chief, you're willing to spend that forfeiture money on this and take a chance that a future council may approve a firing range, because that's not what we're approving here tonight. Is that correct?
Yes.
I just want to make sure that that's correct. We're not voting on it, because I came here under the impression we were actually voting on start a firearm range.
Well, this is not.
It turns out that's not actually the case.
This is not a design plan to build a firing range.
This is something we have to do anyway according to the DEP, because we own the land and we have a plan with them on this.
Right, a design that's required because of the huge amount of fill we accepted over the past 13 months.
Okay.
And it's clear that this is not a commitment.
For a firing.
The possibility.
And
I don't even
any
think we're even talking about it at this point.
design that would go forward on the range would be subject to public hearings and commentary and...
We do have somebody here in the audience, and I see her out back, and I want to make sure that we answer her questions because she's waited 2 hours to get them answered. So, ma'am, could you come up, and you can come up afterwards as well. But I want to make clear that we're not voting on a firing range here tonight, and that this is voting on a plan that we have to do anyway for erosion.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Priscilla Dole. I am not a resident of Waterville. I live on Riverside Drive in Vassaboro, diagonally across the river, a short distance as the crow flies, from the proposed firearms training site. I guess we're not talking about a proposed firearms training site, but I wonder if you would indulge me. I've sat here all evening, and if you do go forward with the proposal, I assure you I will be back, and I will probably come back with the same comments. So I will try and be as efficient as possible. I'm a little more alarmed than I was when I read the newspaper, because Chief Massey has said he has a large department and they need to do lots of shooting. Well, my concerns are related basically to noise pollution and quality of life, sound abatement. And I speak for myself and my pet, but I'm assuming that there are other people who might share my concerns. The area proposed borders one of the most beautiful stretches of the Kennebec River in this area. Imagine kayaking or canoeing down the river. It's pretty pristine, and all of a sudden to be startled, without any warning, by gunshots, as if snipers were on their banks. Given that my pet and I are frequently subjected to gunshot surprises by people who use gravel pits across the river, I'm sure that a shooting range is going to be more of a problem for us. I might have to end up selling my property, in all honesty, because some people are very, very sensitive to gunshots. I have no doubt that a shooting range will exacerbate our stress level and diminish our quality of life. I have no idea how noise levels would be contained or measured. I do note, and I think that we've referred to the Kennebec and our Department of Environmental Protection people, sound reacts differently along a riverbank and in a riverine area as opposed to other areas that we might be more familiar with. I note that fill has already been brought in. I note that building walls for a firing range have already been put in place. I note also from the article in the newspaper that a training site would be far enough off the road so that neighbors would not be affected. However, you have not addressed the way that sound travels, especially gunshots. So neighbors may not be bothered, but I'm a neighbor across the river. And as I say, sound does travel. There is a significant downslope towards the river, and I wonder if this would also not exacerbate the noise issue. I have no doubt the noise pollution from gunshots will have a negative impact on the health and welfare of me and my pet, our very quality of life as others who live in the area. And I would like to note that Chief Massey, I looked up an article from Waterville Police cracking down on aggravating loud pipes from motorists, and I would put this aggravating noise of loud pipes as being something akin to the aggravating loud noise from gunshots. I am not anti-gun. I would like everybody to be familiar with that. But if I might quote Chief Massey, he felt that this noise from the loud pipes was noise pollution, affects the peace, the tranquility, and quality of people's lives. The noise tends to echo off buildings. I would like to put this akin to the gunshots that I have heard coming across the river from the gravel pits.
And ma'am, I'm going to ask you to wrap up your final thoughts.
Okay, I will.
Thank you.
I'd like to know, for the future, I will come back in the future.
You bet.
I would like to suggest two things. Number one, that you continue for the time being, which you're obviously going to do, with your agreement with Winslow. Number two, I would like to suggest that you reconsider this whole issue and look towards constructing an indoor soundproof firing range instead of an outdoor firing range. I think that you've already received contributions from Colby with regard to the fill. I know that they are going to demolish the athletic facility as it stands now. Could not some of this material, instead of just being demolished with the wrecking ball, be used as a resource for perhaps building an indoor soundproof range? And so I guess those are my concerns. It's quality of life, and I think that's something that has not been considered at all. You're looking at the environment without the quality of life of people. Thank you very much, and I will be back later.
You bet. Thank you. And I can promise you, if somebody will build us an indoor firing range, nobody's going to complain about that, especially if we can use it. Yes, sir. We'll take a vote.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Andy Caller, Ward 7. I am the adjacent landowner to that piece of property. I went down when everybody thought I was crazy and reclaimed a gravel pit. Tens of thousands of dollars to take a gravel pit and turn it into 7 acres of pristine waterfront property. And I also own the adjacent field 12 acres above, so I own 20 acres adjacent to this piece of property. For information for the council, is that land there is a waste because of the way that the settling ponds were designed. They were between 2 to 3 acre ponds, and there were 2 of them adjacent with a road down the middle, okay? So the thought of going, for many years, I thought about buying that piece of property myself, just to have it as a buffer, but I didn't want the liability because it was deemed a super site at one point, and you never know how the government's going to come back on you, okay? So because if the waste ponds were over here, yeah, you'd have some clean land to develop on, but because if they were spread out, and because they're so close to the riverbank, it's really going to limit what you can develop. But your idea was really good. The putting solar panels in there, nobody's living there, nobody's doing anything. That's a good thing. So that being said, I also am an NRA member. I'm a Master Marine Guide. I'm a gun owner, and I very much support our police department and their need for a firing range. If that was ever to be considered, however, Chief, as he suggested, I would like to see it only operated by the police department, that there would be a curfew of hours, so it's not being used nonstop, 7 days a week, that we have to listen to gunfire over there. And if it was ever to be open to the public, it would have to go through all the things he's talking about. He has to hire a range master that is there all the time. Because if you have a firing range that people can come down that has nice targets and stuff, they'll bring bottles and cans and they'll shoot their weapons in the air. And my house is about 300 yards. And all summer long, I listen to those dump trucks, hundreds of them, roll in and dump at 6 o'clock in the morning. Bang, 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 the tailgates would go. And the plan was well underway, and they built the massive 150-foot bank, but there's nothing to say some wing-wang is not going to accidentally discharge a weapon, because I've done it myself, and I'm sure you have. And that bullet goes in the air, and my house is 300 yards away. So those are my concerns. So just a little information for everyone. Have a good evening.
Good, thank you. All right, I think we're ready for a vote, especially because we're not voting on a firing arm range like most of us thought we were tonight. This is a vote on grading and erosion control and Chief using your $15,000 of drug forfeiture money. All in favor? All opposed? Next up, Resolution 170, 2018.
Move to read by title only, please.
Sorry we didn't put you first, guys.
Next time you'll be first on the agenda.
Second.
Yes, all in favor, sorry.
Thank you.
Title only.
A resolution providing for issuance of a liquor license to Waterville Regional Arts and Community Center, doing business as Waterville Opera House.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Wonderful. We'll all be over for drinks very shortly, by the way. Mike has a manager's report?
Yes, it's quick, I promise, quick.
You're all mic'd up, you can give it from there, bro.
Okay. Riverwalk dedication is Saturday at 2. You were all given a program, an outline of the program for Saturday, 2 o'clock, right there on the riverbank. It's going to be a short program, so 30 minutes or so. Saturday looks like a good day. Please come. Item 2, unless anyone has a question on item 1. Item 2, the marijuana study committee that the council appointed hopefully we'll meet next Wednesday for the first time.
Wonderful.
The 10th.
I just got to get back to you on
what time?
Can you do it at 4?
4 o'clock? I'd like to actually be there for the first time.
4, October 10, which still trying to confirm it with everyone, but
yeah,
that's what we're shooting for. Last thing, Mount Mercy received word
Well, Waterville Housing Authority doing business as Mercy Woods?
Yes, sorry. Waterville Housing Authority received word that the Mount Mercy project looks like it's going to be able to go forward, the conversion of the, the old sisters dorm to elderly housing, and their hope is that in 2020 they would have units available for rent. So it's a year and a half away.
Speaking of that, any update on the Seaton property?
The which property?
Seaton property.
I heard today, was it you that let us know that?
They're applying for grant money. What they want to do is have more apartments than they originally planned. They want a commercial area, warehousing and apartments, but they'll be having
So hopefully Seaton will continue, just like Mount Mercy, to move forward with that plan.
The Mercy one's pretty definite. They were approved by Maine State Housing.
Yeah, the Mount Mercy thing seems pretty definite.
Very exciting.
You got a question on that?
elderly home. Yes, of course.
Sure. We're still collecting data and reports on parking violations, and every day we've got people enforcing the 2-hour limit zones, and we're keeping track of where the violations are. Paul Urenick, I know, was here earlier. He's still here. He has pledged to continue working with Kobe students, be more diligent about parking where they're supposed to. So we're working on it. As soon as we have something that we think we can recommend, we'll bring it back to the planning committee, which I think would be November. We meet every week. Police chief, myself, Paul, Nick, Champagne. I think Nick has sat in also to review what's gone on the past week. Where are our problems?
There will be, but we would like to allow Chief Massey and his police department to collect more data. And I know that Kobe has been very involved in their own security and data, because we want to make sure we're making that all of that, the actual factual information rather than anecdotal, is available to the parking committee. Because one of the things we learned is that we actually have never really had an overall parking strategy,
right,
like a lot of cities do. So I think there's going to be a much more comprehensive view of parking than we have had in the past.
How much do you charge for a parking ticket?
$10.
$10? Well, keep giving them out.
All right.
Last thing.
Not really the message we want here.
I said there were 3 items, but there's a 4th item. The city's annual report received a very, very high award from Maine Municipal Association. This report is directly a result of a lot of work Patty and Amanda, who was in my office. Yeah. We have plenty of copies at City Hall, our annual report. Last year, we're working on our annual report.
You get yours in? Did you get your section in, Mike? We're good.
I did. That's it for me.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
We're adjourned. Thank you.